The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Friends, it is Reverse Chronological Lightning Round Monday, and I am going to do my best. That is all that I can offer you today. We're going to get the information into your ears, but it's probably not going to sound as good as usual because your old pal Dano has been afflicted with what we broadcasters call our worst nightmare. Laryngitis. I don't know where it came from. I don't go out and scream at places anymore. I'm an old man. All of a sudden, and it was like, it started on Thursday evening last week. It started on Thursday night, but it didn't really hit until a couple days later because Friday, I thought I was just really allergic to something. Eyes were puffy, itchy, the whole thing. I felt like a tightness in my upper chest. And then on Saturday, things just started getting weird. Like the voice wouldn't loosen up. And yesterday, Sunday, I could barely talk at all. So the fact that I'm getting these words out and I'm doing it at a volume where people can hear it is pretty good, actually. But herein lies the problem. When you have a laryngitis, you're supposed to rest your voice, and I have no opportunity for that because we got this podcast, which, by the way, our guest segment today was with a great fellow named Paul Steeno. He's with bloggable.com. Recorded that segment on Saturday, actually, so at least that saves my voice 15 minutes this morning. But we're going to be doing a premium show, the weekly lineup show, myself and Aaron Brewski. That'll be at 2 o'clock for premium subscribers at Hoop Ball. Going to be talking to Christian Villery, who is our Hoop Ball Kings podcast host, about what's going on out there. That's a team that's just playing at an insane clip. So I'm going to talk to Christian tonight. Jacob Bickshorn, also at bloggable.com. We're going to be recording a spot with him that'll probably air either late this week or early next week. And that is, again, hoping I can make it through the day. So there's 4 segments I've got to do today, 4 podcasts or segments. You don't want to throw them into whatever part of the Venn diagram here, whatever bucket. And I'm supposed to rest my voice? Heaven forbid. So hopefully I can make it through the day. We're going to do our best here. I'm not going to shorten anything. You're still going to get the full force of the podcast. It's just going to be, some old broadcaster tricks where I turn the volume up on my machine and I talk a little bit quieter. Oh, and a lot of water pauses in today's show. I'm going to do my best to actually try to pause the recording when I take my sips of water, but you guys might get stuck with a couple of 4 or 5 second breaks in the action. So you already heard about Paul Steeno. He's coming up in a few minutes. It's Reverse Chronological Lightning Round Monday. I am Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation. Of course, a member of the Dash Radio Network and a member of the Hoop Ball Radio Network, which is, as always, presented by our title sponsor, Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. They have totally revitalized the Hoop Ball staff with caffeine coming out of their ears. Everybody's so wired over here these days. You guys got to check it out. It's so great. They're an unbelievable partner. They're actually running some of our Friday live shows as part of spots on other social media platforms. That's how awesome they are. This is a company that not only cares about how their product is doing, they care about us too. They're fantasy junkies. We all want to see each other succeed. So if you have a moment, please do check them out. It's HawaiianIsles.com or go to Amazon and just search for Hawaiian Isles and it'll pop up. Honestly, you could type the whole name, Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. But once you type Hawaiian Isles, in fact, I think I got as far as Hawaiian IS. And then it was like, are you looking for Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee? I was like, well, as it turns out, I am. So go check that out. Go buy some if you like what you see. It makes for great holiday gifts. It makes for great coffee in your own belly. And for someone, myself, who can't handle caffeine, it smells delicious. That's what I can give you from my own perspective. Everybody at Hoop Ball is drinking it now. It's crazy. A couple folks got a couple of samples. They're hooked, so you should be too. So again, a big thank you to Hawaiian Isles for partnering with us here in this venture while we grow our two companies side by side. It's a match made in heaven. Let's see if we can win some fantasy dollars as the year goes along as well. We do, by the way, we just got our DraftKings room open first thing on Monday morning. That's great. It's 100 slots in this one, so the prizes will double. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The prizes will double. It's still a top 10. It's not top 20 out of 100 now, but the top 10 win $30 a piece instead of $15. The number 1 spot takes home a Hoop Ball t-shirt, and the number 2 spot takes home a goodie bag from the aforementioned Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. So we're going to get that link out to you on Twitter. As I mentioned last week, we're also starting a mailing list for these DFS contests. I have imported the first chunk of names, and if you'd like to be on it, because I haven't sent out the mailer yet, because we just got this contest link, and I got to get this podcast done first, let me know. Tweet at me. You guys know where to find me on Twitter, at Dan Besbris. You can also post in the Hoop Ball forums that you want to get on the DFS contest mailing list. Whatever it is, we'll find a way to get your email address to me. If you're worried about privacy, we can do it via Twitter DM so other people can't see it. Whatever. We'll work it out. We'll get you on the mailing list. I want to make sure anybody that wants to be in these contests gets alerted the second that we open them, because last week it filled up, and I don't know if a 100-person room is going to fill up this week, but it will eventually, because it's been growing every single week. The first time we didn't fill it up. It was 41 out of 50 people or something like that. And then it filled at 50, but it did it with like 15 minutes to go. And then the third time it filled up at 2:22. And the fourth time it filled up at 1:05 in the afternoon. So it's been getting earlier every time, meaning there's greater interest every time. And so my guess is we'll probably get up to around 70 or 80 people out of 100 this week. So maybe you don't need the immediate alert. But once this 100-person room gets full, you're going to want to get the alert so you can get in there right out of the chute, reserve your spot for a contest now that's starting to turn into pretty decent prizes. A 10-to-1 payoff is pretty good, especially if you get first or second place, you get that bonus gift. Okay, let's get into the fantasy stuff, because we do not have a ton of time on today's podcast, and so I want to get right into the reverse chronological lightning round. We're going to whip our way through the weekend, look at every team's most recent box score, and give you a reset so that we can get this week started. We know where everybody stands. Atlanta at Brooklyn. Nothing really super interesting out of the Atlanta side. Kevin Huerter was a guy that has been talked about a fair amount lately, and you guys heard me talking about him on Twitter, most likely. I don't think I mentioned him too much on the podcast. He's a guy that I don't fully trust, and I think many of you have asked me on Twitter, hey, is Huerter a guy? And I said, he's a guy that I'm probably picking up, but I'm probably not using him towards my games cap. And that made me look stupid, because for a couple games in a row, he put up really nice numbers, but buried inside of those numbers on Huerter was a lack of particular stats and unsustainable other stats. Basically, what I'm saying is, when he had those back-to-back games of 19 points and he hit 9 3-pointers and had 4 steals and 2 blocks, he did it while hitting 55% of his shots in one game and 70% of his shots in the other. And a dude who's taken that many 3-pointers is just not going to shoot that percentage long-term. Even as a rookie, we can look at it and say, okay, this is an unsustainable number. He's not going to average 2 steals a game. He's not going to average 1 block a game. He's not that type of guy. Who does that type of stuff? Nerlens Noel? Is Kevin Huerter Nerlens Noel? No. Is he Anthony Davis? No. He's a guy who apparently has a really nice 3-point stroke. He's knocking down a ton of them, but also doesn't rebound or pass very much. 2 rebounds, 3 assists in one of those games, 1 and 1 in the other one. There was a stretch where he was getting about 4 assists a game, which is pretty good, but that also felt like more of a high water mark. There were a couple games where he had 4, 5, 6 rebounds, but mostly it's been closer to 3. And to me, that's the stuff that jumps out. Like, what does the line look like when his shooting levels off? And you got the bad version in their last ball game. That's the low water mark. Don't get it twisted. That's not what he is. He's not 4 points and 2 assists. But if things aren't dropping, if the steals are not rolling in like they were, there's a midpoint here. And that's what you have to be looking for when you make a pickup. So I'm not totally sold on Huerter. I think he's a guy that in an unlimited games format, he's probably worth deploying right now, because he is sitting right on the edge of solid value. I think he's top 90, top 100 over the last couple of weeks, and that's decent. But again, 53% shooting, 2 combined defensive stats, that's unsustainable stuff. So he probably drifts back towards top 110, 120. And so, again, in limited games format, that's probably worth using, and then you hope that minutes open up for him a little bit more or shots open up for him. But again, you're talking about a team with Taurean Prince out, so that's going to cut into it a little bit. There are days where DeAndre Besbris plays better, and that cuts into it a little bit. So I'm not totally sold. That's the final version on that one. Rondé Ellis-Jefferson, I clobbered on Friday's show, and so he went out and had a couple of decent games over the weekend. I'm still not buying in. He doesn't hit three-pointers. His steals are maybe averaging out a little bit. His free throw stroke is not going to help you. Maybe it won't hurt you as much as it has been, but it's not a helpful note either. And so he becomes kind of a points, rebounds, and sometimes assists guy, and I suppose there are uses for that on teams, but it's just not my cup of tea. If he does it for another few games in a row, then maybe I'll actually turn and look at him a little bit, but not yet. And plus, Allen Crabbe's been out. Some of those shots that he's taking are shots that go to Crabbe. He was starting to play better before the knee acted up. So, no. No thanks. Philly at Cleveland. Jimmy Butler returned and had 19 points on only 10 shots. And not surprisingly, they whipped the Cavaliers because Cleveland stinks. The Furkan Korkmaz and TJ McConnell streaming avenue is likely closed now with Jimmy Butler back, and we can move along from that situation. Cleveland, well, if Larry Nance Jr. doesn't have a good fantasy line, then it's really going to be an empty situation. Matthew Dellavedova is actually playing very well in his return to the Cavaliers, but he's not a standard league guy. And then the rest of these dudes all have gaping holes in their fantasy games, and we've been down that road a few times before, so for me, it's Larry Nance or nothing until Tristan Thompson and then Kevin Love come back. Easy enough. The Knicks, we still have this new starting lineup. They lost to the Indiana Pacers, although they were somewhat competitive in this game. Emmanuel Mudiay at 18 and 6. It seems like he's actually won that point guard job, even with Trey Burke back, but anything can happen. We know this Knicks team. You could flip it at a moment's notice. Enes Kanter, Tim Hardaway, Noah Vonleh, those are the guys that are right now safe in their minutes. Kevin Knox is getting a long look in the starting lineup, and he's been a little bit better. He's still sitting more in that points league realm because of bad percentages and kind of, at times at least, a lack of peripheral stats. But if you are in a points league, then you should definitely have him, especially while he's playing giant minutes. This lineup could change again in a week. So you sit on that. Mudiay also, by the way, more of a points league sort of guy because of bad percentages as well. On the Indiana side, Darren Collison picked up 5 fouls in 16 and a half minutes of this game and ended up as a non-factor, which is a shame too, because he had 5 assists at halftime, and it looked like he was on his way to actually a decent point guardy sort of Darren Collison line where maybe he'd end up with like 6 points, which is not very good, but couple of threes, he had 3 rebounds, and then he didn't play basically the whole second half. Oops. So Corey Joseph played 30 minutes and didn't do much with them, and then everything else was basically as you'd expect. Victor Oladipo getting himself locked back in. Miles Turner had a solid game. Domantas Sabonis. Thad Young has been playing better. He saw 32 minutes again. That's a big deal for him. Getting up and over to that 30-minute mark. Got a little attitude these days. Lakers, on the second half of a back-to-back, just didn't have anything in the tank. This is a weird one. They got blown out by the Washington Wizards. John Wall went huge, 40 and 14 in this game, and they just rolled them. They rolled them. No JaVale McGee. Could that have been it? LeBron was just not himself. 5 for 16 shooting, 3 for 6 free throws, 4 turnovers. This might be the worst game LeBron has all year. Very unusual. I know KCP had a nice game for the Lakers, but I said it on Twitter. I'm done chasing their shooting guards, knowing whether it's going to be he or Josh Hart on any given night. I'm just not. They trade off. Sometimes it's 2 on, 2 off. It's not worth it. The low water marks are too low, and the high water marks aren't high enough. Over on the Wizards side, no Otto Porter and no Trevor Ariza. So whatever you're going to try to glean from this game is going to vanish later this week, possibly by their next ball game. Satoransky played 46 minutes. That's probably not going to happen again anytime soon. He plays 7 minutes more than Bradley Beal. Keep one eye on him just to see how the minute distribution takes place, but I would venture to guess that he's a guy that's going to suffer when they get both of their wings back. He's going to fall back into mostly a backup point guard spot. And then you're going to see Washington probably bring on some other dudes. I mean, you might see Satoransky log some minutes as a backup too, but the wing minutes are basically gone. Can you keep an eye on him? Absolutely. Absolutely. Sam Decker had 20 points. He took 15 shots in this game. Let's not get carried away. Okay? Okay. I know Markieff Morris hurt his neck, so maybe someone's always going to be out. Maybe that's just how it is, but I mean, I think this team is going to be mostly healthy within the next week or two, and then you're going to see these fringy guys move back to the fringe. A Dallas Mavericks team that is very good at home just lost to the Sacramento Kings by 7 in their own arena. Sacramento just pouring it on these days. They play incredibly fast. After going through a little bit of a mini slump, they've ratcheted it back up again. De'Aaron Fox had a really nice one. Nemanja Bjelica playing very well with Marvin Bagley out for a couple of weeks. He's a must-stream guy right now. Any format, he should be streamed because he's a top 75 dude when he's playing starters minutes. Buddy Hield knocking down shots like crazy. Sometimes he doesn't do enough of the other stuff, but the shooting percentage is so nice for him, that the stroke is so nice that it kind of makes up for it. And, of course, we'll talk to Christian Villery later this week about these Sacramento Kings. Mavericks are a boring fantasy team. If you're trying to pull something out of this, use your energy elsewhere. Perhaps on the Miami Heat, we're using energy on teams. Hassan Whiteside is back. He played 23 minutes in this game, had 17 and 12 with 3 blocks. He and Bam Adebayo seem like they're more or less locked into a timeshare. Some of it has to do with matchup stuff. I think they like the way that Whiteside can set a tone early in a ball game with the rebounding and shot blocking, because he's sort of, I don't know, Adebayo can sort of fall into some blocked shots every once in a while, but Whiteside is he's a different beast in terms of impacting other teams' shots. So Miami can get off to whatever, kind of slow, plodding start to the game, and then they'll open it up and run a little bit more. But still, that's not even I don't think that's the thing that I want to focus on today's podcast. I think we knew Whiteside was going to get his starter's job back. I think we knew Adebayo was going to slip into a very late valuation playing behind Hassan, because Bam needs minutes. He needs minutes to get his rebounds. He needs minutes to get his putback slams and stuff like that. He's not a crazy high usage guy. The guys out there that are making the most of their time on the floor are actually right now Derek Jones Jr. and Kelly Olynyk still, who yesterday didn't fully get involved. A tough matchup for big men, obviously, with Anthony Davis, and then for most of the game, Julius Randle on the other side. But Olynyk played 32 minutes with all the other big men healthy. That's a great sign. The fact that he didn't have a great fantasy line, well, sometimes it's more about the availability, the opportunity, than the results. I mean, Olynyk had been cruising along, 8, 6, and 1. Fine, not a great fantasy game. I'll give you that. But 32 minutes for a guy that can go super versatile is great news. And he's a must-hold guy, and he's a guy that I'm starting because when he's on the floor, he's a threat to hit three-pointers and get steals and block shots and rebound and assist. He has the potential to actually be a 9-cat fantasy guy. The shooting percentage needs to come back up a little bit. Probably a few too many shots from downtown. He's shooting just 44% this year. He's a 48% career guy. And yes, the three-point attempts are up. But he's a decent foul shooter, shooting 80% at the free throw line. If he's out there for 30 minutes, you're talking about a guy that's going to average a steal and probably like 0.7 blocks a game. Both of those numbers are basically helpful. You're talking about a guy that can get to 3 assists from the center spot, a guy that can get you 6 to 7 rebounds. It's a good-looking thing. I think I sent out a tweet a few weeks ago that was like, all I want for Christmas is more minutes for Kelly Olynyk and Richaun Holmes. And I'm getting my present, which is amazing because I'm a little Hebrew boy. So thanks, Santa. Derek Jones Jr. is a different case. He's not going to take many shots. He's a terrible foul shooter, but he's out there just grabbing a boatload of high-flying rebounds and just going crazy on the defensive end of the ball. And I honestly have no idea. I know I'm supposed to be out here telling you I know the answer to all these questions. I don't have a clue if any of this stuff is sustainable because nobody's ever really given Derek Jones Jr. enough leash to show whether any of this stuff is sustainable. Last year, with these very same Heat, he averaged 15 minutes a game and averaged 0.6 blocks and 2.4 rebounds. This year, in 16 and a half minutes a game, he's averaging 0.7 blocks, 0.8 steals, and 4.3 rebounds. He's doing a lot of rebounding on the offensive glass, which is intriguing because when he can play a 2 or a 3 spot, if they need him to, because he's tall and lean, he can go up and over a lot of those other smaller guys. So maybe the offensive rebounding is sustainable. Maybe this is something he's just good at. The steals and blocks always felt like something he should be good at because of how crazy athletic he is. But I don't have a clue if this is going to keep going. I picked him up in a league where I'm punting assists. He seems like actually a pretty good fit there because he has a total of 1 assist over his last 4 basketball games. 1 total assist over 4 games. Not 1 per game, 1 total. But in a punt assist format, he's been amazing lately. And just pray he doesn't go to the foul line. The Dwayne Wade farewell tour continued with 19-6, but 5 turnovers. He's more of a points league option at this point. And no, I'm not interested in Tyler Johnson. So the Heat are interesting right now. Julius Randle turned his ankle late, middle of the fourth quarter of this game. I don't know what this means because they still don't have Niko Mirotic back. They still don't have Elfrid Payton back, who's obviously a point guard. But you might be seeing the Pelicans play Anthony Davis at the center again. I know he doesn't want to, but he may not have a choice. What do they do with backup forward minutes? Well, you're down to like Solomon Hill as a stretch 4. Is that a worth using? Probably not. Toronto and Denver, everybody's all banged up on these teams. I'm not that interested in it because, especially with Toronto, it seems like most of these guys are due back sooner than later. Some soreness involved, nothing legitimate outside of Jonas Valanciunas. So you stick with your main guys there. For the Nuggets, maybe there's a little bit more of a window, but guys like Monty Morris, Torrey Craig, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, sometimes even Trey Lyles, there's too much trading off behind Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Mason Plumlee is probably the third most trustworthy guy on the Denver Nuggets. If you really had to pare it down, he's probably the third guy that I would consider. Turn the clock back to Saturday. Yes, Saturday is all right for fighting. 7 games on Saturday. Utah and Orlando finished up the Orlando 2-game Mexican swing. Yeah, that's right. These games were played in Mexico, and Orlando won both of them. Utah is slumping right now, but from a fantasy standpoint, it's sort of the usual suspects on this team. And Orlando, we're just hoping for Jonathan Isaac to get himself involved on the offensive end because he had 7 rebounds, a steal, and 3 blocks, but took 3 shots in 34 minutes. And you're still holding because if you add any sort of offense to that fantasy line, then you have one of the best lines of the evening. I mean, think if he took 8 or 9 shots instead of 3, and even if he only makes 3 or 4 of them, what is that? Say 8 points, 1 3-pointer, mix that in with 4 defensive stats. Yeah, you're not bailing out on that. I know it's been tough. I know it's been tough sledding, but he's playing 33 minutes a game, and a guy that can do that type of stuff on defense, you know, it's a unicorn. I hate to use that term because everybody wants to call everybody a unicorn, but he has that potential to win you 2 categories. 2 hard-to-win categories, by the way, by himself. He can be that kind of impact guy. We already talked about the Lakers and how I'm not chasing any shooting guards, and that game against Charlotte was another example of it. I also don't want to glean too much from this Charlotte game. This was after an OT loss to the Knicks the night before, so they were exhausted, and the starters basically just got waxed. Kemba Walker was terrible. Marvin Williams was terrible. Jeremy Lamb was not very good. Batum was terrible. The only starter that wasn't the worst was Cody Zeller, and then it was the bench in blowout time that got most of the stats in this game. So not much to take away from that. I know a lot of you are like, what happened to Marvin? Well, look at the previous day. He was awesome and completely beat, and then LeBron just took it right down his throat. Boston in Detroit, Marcus Smart had 21, 8, and 3 with 3 steals and 5 3-pointers in this ball game. And he's become, well, to me, still mostly a 3-point specialist. And I know he's had a couple of offensive outbursts, 2 of his last 3 games. He's actually scored in double digits. But it had been all the way back until November 30th. You got to dial it back 5 games for the last time he hit double figures in points. He's going nuts in the steals department, which is something I think we all should have seen. If you drafted him or if you're holding him, it was for the defensive stats. The offense is not going to stick. He's not a good shooter. It's not going to magically change overnight. So when he has a hot game, cool, but you also probably missed it. It's easy to forget. The very previous game, in fact, it was the night before, Marcus Smart had a goose egg in the points category. 1 rebound, 7 assists, and 4 steals. That other stuff was actually pretty decent. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to get you a couple of rebounds, a couple of assists, and a bunch of steals, this is your guy. But don't expect him to go nuts from three-point land. It's just not going to happen every night. Nothing else really to note on that Boston side. Reggie Bullock came back for Detroit and had 4 3-pointers, but he has a fairly empty fantasy game, so nothing changes over there either. Houston playing better these days. They beat Memphis on the road. PJ Tucker finally had a decent ball game with 4 3-pointers, a steal, and 7 rebounds. That's basically what you're holding him for. That's your late round valuation, and then everybody else was basically the same on the Houston side. For Memphis, nice to see Marc Gasol look a little bit more like himself for a game. 17, 9, and 4 with 3 steals and a 3-pointer. Jaren Jackson Jr. got 31 minutes in this game. Thank goodness. 9 and 7 with a steal and 3 blocks. That's good news. JaMychal Green played 25 minutes and had 13, 6, and 3, and he was basically a defensive stat away from having another decent fantasy line, and that's the Grizzlies we were hoping for. Question is, how much of it was because Kyle Anderson was out? I have to think very little, because Slow-Mo doesn't shoot the ball at all. But where do those minutes come from for Anderson? Is it all small forward? Is there some power forward involved? Joakim Noah only played 8 minutes in this game, and that's cool, because that meant they're still willing to throw the other guys out there, go a little bit smaller, right? Houston forced him to play a little faster, and then we got to see the guys on Memphis that we want to see in this game. Chicago beat San Antonio on the road. Oh, brutal loss for the Spurs. These are the games you got to win if you want to sneak into that last playoff spot out west. Lauri Markkanen had 23. Chris Dunn played 36 minutes and had 24, 7, and 3 with 2 steals. Welcome back, Christopher. This is going to be a fun ride. Let's hope Zach LaVine gets back soon. The Bulls are going to start to be a little bit more fun these days with Jabari Parker out of the rotation and on the trade block. The worries, I think, for this team are more on the big man side. Lauri Markkanen is locked into minutes. He's not going to lose out to Bobby Portis or Wendell Carter Jr. Those 2 guys are going to be fighting with each other, and they did in this game. They basically split the center minutes, if you want to call it that, and neither one of them had a good game. Carter Jr. did get into foul trouble. That may have played a role in him seeing fewer minutes in this one, but it's a situation to keep an eye on. Minnesota Phoenix. Whoops. Minnesota losing on the road to the Phoenix Suns. No Taj Gibson. He was out with a personal situation. So Dario Saric got a 1-game window here and went for 15 and 11. For the Wolves, though, they're basically going as Rob Covington goes right now. He's in a slump, and I don't know if it's the knee or if it's just the up and down of a long season, but he only played 25 minutes. The defensive stats were still there. He still had 2 steals and a block, but the other stuff just wasn't. And there's no real reason for him to lose minutes to anyone on this team. Just trying to get right, I guess. I wouldn't panic, though. Buy low, if anything. Over on the Phoenix side, they got Devin Booker back. We still haven't seen them with Rivers and Oubre in the mix, so I'm not going to go head over heels for Mikal Bridges playing 40 minutes. DeAnthony Melton still only played 21 minutes in this game without Austin Rivers in town, so that number is likely in trouble for Melton. Rashawn Holmes, 22 and a half minutes. That's lovely. That's great news. I know Ayton briefly had foul trouble in the first half. And Rashawn finally with a slightly slower game, but if he's playing 20 minutes or more, he's a must-start guy. So is TJ Warren, so is Devin Booker. The other guy, and DeAndre Ayton as well. The other guys remain a bit of a question mark. Pretty curious to see who ends up with all the minutes. There's a universe here where Oubre and Bridges end up splitting minutes in like a 28-20 mix. There's a universe here where Austin Rivers gets 25 to 30 minutes and Melton gets the other, whatever that would, 23, 20, 18, What is Jamal Crawford's role going to be going forward? A lot of questions with Phoenix. To me, Kelly Oubre is your more 9 caddy kind of stash guy to see how this thing plays out. Austin Rivers is more of the points league type. Bridges, I'm not even holding him. I don't think there's almost any universe where he can play enough minutes in his low usage role to do stuff, to be worthy of holding, especially now that they've brought in 2 players and only sent out 1. So minutes actually got more scarce for the Phoenix Suns. But there's a world where Oubre and Rivers could potentially hold value in different types of fantasy leagues, and that's why those are the guys you're looking at a little bit closer. Clippers are on the tail end of this never being stationary for a game stretch. It's a very weird thing, and I saw a tweet about it, and I looked, and I went, oh, that's actually really interesting. The Clippers, you got to go back 12 or 13 games to find the last time they actually got to stay in the same city for more than 2 days. It's nuts. It was November 10th through the 15th. They had a 3-game homestand. That's a month ago, guys. That's more than a month ago. And then they had a 3-game road trip, back home for 1, to Portland for 1, back home for 1, a 4-game road trip, home, road, road, and now they're finally home. They're finally home for a 3-game homestand. Do I trust the Clippers immediately? Probably not, but this is an opportunity for them to sort of shake off the fatigue that has seen them, drop a few games now. They've lost 5 of their last 6. It's been a tough stretch. And they got Portland in their house tonight. Difficult. But this is a team that wants to get right. This is an opportunity for them to finally do so. A lot of buy lows on this Clipper team, by the way, because they've been playing poorly. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is making... Okay, this is a weird spot to be in as a fantasy analyst because you want to see people succeed, but when I came out on this podcast a month ago and said I'm not as bullish on this kid as the rest of the fantasy community and got killed for it, I was wearing that one for a while, but it's starting to swing back a little bit. He had that stretch at the end of November where he looked really, really good, and things have, not unsurprisingly, leveled off a little bit for the young fella. This might be a little bit of a buy low for him. He could be hitting a little bit of a wall. Teams are starting to game plan for him a little bit now. But you're seeing more Pat Beverly. You're seeing more Avery Bradley as Doc Rivers goes back to the veterans when he needs guys who can sort of muster a little extra energy. I think Shai will reemerge as the season goes along, but he's still well outside on the year of standard league value, and in almost every stretch of games that you put together, he's outside of that mix as well. Last 30 days, he's number 160. Last 14 days, he's number 187. Last week, he's number 199. Full season, he's number 166. So not quite. Not quite. And I feel better about not grabbing him in a bunch of places because now it's leveled off. Oklahoma City is sort of the usual tale. Nothing to see here, basically. Nice to see Nerlens Noel get 4 defensive stats again. That was cool. Paul George has been red hot. Russell Westbrook hasn't been able to throw a stone in the ocean, and so they're treading water until Russ can figure out how to get a shot to drop. Quick check on Friday. Make sure we've knocked out all the teams. There are still a couple that we didn't profile over the weekend. A couple, not a ton, but a few. The Milwaukee Bucks played on Friday, didn't play over the weekend. I don't know what the hell's going on with Chris Middleton right now. We've got a right finger sprain on the ledger for Chris. Is that why his shot's been terrible? I'm thinking it might be between the ears, and he just needs to bust out of the slump. But hopefully, he's back for their next ball game. We don't have an update yet. When he was playing through it before, and maybe they figured they could rest him in that one and then get him a couple of days of rest over the weekend. You know, they didn't play Saturday or Sunday. They've got Detroit on the road tonight. He's probable. And so that means that he didn't play basically for 4 days of rest in between. That's a nice little stretch with skipping the one game, and it seems like maybe the Bucks are taking advantage of that with Middleton. And if he plays tonight, we'll obviously keep a close watch on him and see if he seems mostly healthy. Would love to see a game where he makes more than 28% of his shots. The Warriors didn't play over the weekend, but they're a boring story at this. I mean, they're fun, but they're a boring story because it's back to being the usual fare. Portland didn't play over the weekend. Mo Harkless was the guy we were watching on that team. He played 27 minutes in their game on Friday and didn't do anything with them. And such is the plight of the low-usage guy. He had 8 and 4 with 2 assists. If he's out there for 30 minutes, though, he's a guy that can get you a rebound, a 3, a steal, and a block. Tough competition, obviously. The Toronto Raptors, a very good team, but I would have liked to have seen more from Harkless. He's a guy that's on my watch list, though, distinctly, because he seems to be slowly winning that job away from Evan Turner and could end up being fall into the Dan Besbris old man category of 9-cat, quiet, late-round guys who do it by not turning the ball over. All right, let's dig a little deeper on the Chicago Bulls. We saw a nice game out of Chris Dunn on Sunday, and that actually occurred after our chat with Paul Steeno, so we're going to jump into that right now. And I actually asked Paul, preview this right here, I asked Paul what can the expectation be here from Chris Dunn, and I don't think either of us thought it was going to be that fast, but we both thought it was going to be pretty good. Anyway, let's just get into the interview. We can wrap it up after that. As if there weren't enough things to talk about with the Chicago Bulls, now we got word coming down on Saturday morning that Zach LaVine is going back to Chicago to be reevaluated. So now we just have to put one more thing on the list, and thank goodness that there are people out there that are paying closer attention to this stuff than I am, and can tell us really a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes. Paul Steeno, he's with blogabull.com. He's popping on the podcast this morning. Paul, welcome to the show. Thanks again for carving out time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I wanted to, and when I initially reached out to you, the intention was just to talk about the sort of reintegration of Chris Dunn and Bobby Portis, and even if you stretch it back a week earlier to Lauri Markkanen. But now we've got this Zach LaVine news where he landed funny after a layup attempt at the very end of a basketball game and, quote, heard a pop, and nobody ever wants to hear that. What does it mean at this point, at least? And we're touching base on Saturday, and this is going to air on a Monday, but so, maybe something does come out between now and then. But as we currently stand, it's a little bit nebulous, isn't it? Like, they're just saying at least 2 games. What does that mean?
Well, right now it's at least 2 games. He's being reevaluated. I think he's getting more X-rays, MRIs, whatever they do to players when they have these types of injuries. But with Zach LaVine and the injury history that he has had, the 2 ACL injuries, I believe, in his NBA career, you always in kind of your back of your mind think that it's going to be worse than what you originally thought. And as a Bulls fan, just with all the horrible injury luck and all the crap that kind of happens to this franchise all the time, we're kind of, trained to be very pessimistic about all this stuff. So, you hope that it's super minor and that's only 1 or 2 games, but you never know with these type of injuries, especially with a player that has had an injury history like LaVine has had.
Does it concern you at all with how secretive they're being through this whole process, or is this sort of par for the course?
This is kind of par for the course. They don't, professional athletes in general, you don't, get a ton of information. They're not extremely transparent about all these injuries stuff. So we'll see what happens when he gets reevaluated, but I'm not super concerned about that, I don't think.
All right, well, that's good to hear. A little cautious optimism. We'll go with it on that front. By the way, you can follow Paul on Twitter at PBSteeno. P as in Paul, B as in boy, STEENO. He is with blogabull.com. They're on Twitter at bullsblogger. So the initial stuff, the stuff that we were going to talk about on today's show, we can transition to that pretty quickly here then, and that's Chris Dunn and Bobby Portis coming back from their 4 to 6 week absences. It seems like everybody was out for Chicago this year. Certainly enough drama happening off to the side, but what's the schedule for these guys? There was about 20 to 24 minutes the first couple of games back. How long before they're ramped up to full tilt? And then I think we have a pretty good idea of what that means for Dunn. What does full tilt mean for Portis? So that's kind of the direction we're going here. We'll start with part 1 on that. What kind of a timeline do you think it's going to be getting these guys back up to full speed?
So with Bobby Portis, especially with the Jabari Parker thing that happened, Jabari Parker was recently taken out of the regular rotation. And when the initial report came out from ESPN, it used the verbiage regular rotation. So that's kind of vague. We didn't know what that meant. Would it be he was playing 30 minutes before this? Would that mean it would go down to 15 or 20 minutes? Would it be 10? what would that mean? And in the first game where this happened, Jabari only played 4 minutes. He played 4 minutes at the end of the first quarter. So it looks like, and now he's in trade rumors today. So he could be completely gone. And even if he stays, he doesn't really have a role right now. So what that means for Bobby Portis is they play a similar position, the power forward position, the 4 back up to Lauri Markkanen. So with Jabari Parker out of the picture, I think that Bobby Portis's minutes are going to be ramped up. He was playing 28.2 minutes per game prior to his injury this season, and he played 18 in his first game back, 21, almost 22 in his second game back, and I think as that 6-man, one of the best 6 men in the league, I think he's going to be close to that 30-minute mark once the Bulls really start to get him going. And another thing, with Jabari out of the picture, Bobby Portis kind of becomes the man on that second unit in terms of scoring. Because if you look at the other guys that the Bulls have as their reserves, you have Arcidiacono, Cameron Payne, Shaquille Harrison, Chandler Hutchinson, Robin Lopez, Cristiano Felicio. If you're not like a diehard NBA fan or a diehard Bulls fan, you probably don't know half those guys. So in terms of like offensive production and being the guy on the second unit, it's kind of Bobby Portis' world there. So I think in terms of the raw scoring numbers, the rebounding numbers, I think Bobby Portis is in for a big year, especially if Jabari continues to get exiled a little bit like he has.
You mentioned, you said Bobby's World in there, and I was thrown back to like an early 90s cartoon. Am I dating myself a little bit? Do you remember the Howie Mandel voiced show Bobby's World?
No, I was born in 1995, so no idea.
I dated myself. I have a bad tendency to do that.
It's all good. It's all good.
So you think Bobby Portis is going to get up to pretty standard minutes then? It sounds like he's not really going to be a traditional backup, and he'll be closer to that almost starters minutes.
Yeah, just because the Bulls are, like I was saying, they're so thin in terms of the rotation of guys that can come in and give you quality minutes and especially score the ball. I named all those guys that kind of are fringe NBA players at this point. And I think, like I said before the injury, it was 28.2 minutes per game for Bobby Portis as the 6th man. And I think that was with Jabari in the picture, and now with Jabari out of the picture, I think that they're going to be relying on Bobby even more than they had been.
So on the Chris Dunn front, I think I know the answer to this question, but I need confirmation. When he's up to speed, he's the full-time starting point guard, right?
Yeah, so Chris Dunn, it's kind of a similar situation as Bobby Portis. He's in a really good situation in terms of getting every opportunity to show what he can do, just because the Bulls, the point guard situation, it's a running joke among Bulls fans how thin the point guard unit is. Behind Chris Dunn, it's Ryan Arcidiacono, Cameron Payne, Shaquille Harrison. Chris Dunn is head and shoulders above those guys in terms of how good he is. So he gets to run the starting unit. I think he's going to get plenty of run and get every opportunity as the starting point guard, just by default, just because the Bulls are so thin at that position. So and with Chris Dunn, he's one of those guys that he stuffs every category of the box score. Last year, he averaged 13.4 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.0 assists, 2.0 steals, which was tied 4th in the NBA. So if you're looking at him from a fantasy standpoint, he's going to be able to score for you in a bunch of different categories. And with the big opportunity that he has this season to play and not have really anybody threatening his job, I think that's going to bode well for him in terms of his production, because last year the Bulls really gave Jaren Grant kind of a big chance at point guard, so he kind of had to split minutes with him. And this year it's kind of, Ryan Arcidiacono is great. I really like him as a player, but Chris Dunn is head and shoulders above him, so I think he's going to be playing 30-plus once they get him up to speed.
Can his body handle it? I know it's a weird question to ask about a young guy, but he does seem to be pretty dinged up throughout his short career so far. Do you feel like it's been a little more fluky, or is this a guy where maybe they do need to be a little careful?
Well, the injury last year that he had when he fell on a dunk and he ripped his lip open or something like that was fluky, obviously. But the MCL sprain, you don't want to see that from a young guy. And I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, right?
it's difficult because I mean the Bulls can't, like I said, they don't have much production behind him, so they really can't be super cautious with him. But at the same time, you want to keep your players healthy. So it'll be interesting how they handle that. But once again, I think he's going to play. If I were to put money on it, I think he's going to play starters minutes, and it'll be over 30 per game. So
on the small forward spot is one of the areas on the floor that I wasn't necessarily planning on touching upon, but as long as we sort of danced around the whole like what happened to poor Jabari Parker, it looks like Justin Holiday is almost unchallenged in his minutes at that spot now. Is that an accurate statement? He seems like he's been a really nice fit.
Yeah, Justin Holiday has been killing it. He's been in trade. He's been in trade rumors a lot as a guy that the Bulls can potentially flip before the trade deadline because he's been playing so well, and teams, a team that's actually contending could use a guy who shoots threes, a veteran, kind of a leader type player on the team who does everything the right way. But the only guy kind of challenging Justin Holiday for minutes is going to be Chandler Hutchinson. Part of the reason that the Bulls said that they were demoting Jabari Parker is they wanted to give Chandler Hutchinson some run. He's the rookie that the Bulls picked late in the first round. I don't remember exactly the pick right now off the top of my head. I don't want to guess because I'll get it wrong. But he's from Boise State. He's a rookie. He's, I don't know, raw is a good way to put it. He plays decent defense. He's pretty good at driving straight line to the basket, but he doesn't, his shot isn't great. He makes rookie mistakes, but that's the only guy that would challenge Justin Holiday for minutes, depending on how much the Bulls want to give him some run, get him, used to the NBA, kind of breaking the rookie. But Justin Holiday, I think, he's a big part of what the Bulls are doing this season. And obviously last season, Silver cracked down on the resting the veterans for tanking purposes. So I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. So Justin Holiday is, I think he's going to be rock solid and steady for the Bulls as long as he, stays on the team and doesn't get traded.
Very nice. It seems like now that the team is getting healthy, things are finally crystallizing a little bit. You've got Dunn, you've got, hopefully Levine in the not too distant future, Holiday, Markkanen, Portis. Who am I forgetting? I'm sure there's somebody I left off that list.
Wendell Carter Jr.
Oh, yes, yeah. Of course. That was going to be the last question. I knew I was missing something. His minutes have seemingly trended down a tiny bit with Portis back. Is that anything that, from the fantasy perspective, people should be worried about, or development-wise? What do you think the plan is on Carter Jr.?
Carter Jr., wait, are you asking how many minutes, or do you want me to evaluate?
Oh, both. It could be honestly both at this point, because there were stretches where he looked incredible, and then there were stretches where it seems like he was getting outplayed by some of the other bigs on the team. What do you think they want to do with him? I guess going forward is the better way to phrase it. I'll leave it open ended for you.
Okay. With Wendell Carter Jr., he's kind of the prize draft pick for the Bulls, obviously from last season. So the Bulls really like him, and they are giving him a lot of run, and they want to develop him. He doesn't have a ton of – he plays center, obviously. He's kind of the anchor at that center position because Lauri Markkanen, even though he's 7 feet tall, he's more of a 4 than a 5 because Lauri can't really protect the rim like Wendell Carter Jr. does. But Wendell Carter Jr., Robin Lopez is still going to get his minutes. Felicio has kind of been exiled as well, kind of like Jabari, just because Felicio has been completely ineffective. So I'd say Wendell Carter Jr., he's going to continue to get minutes for the Bulls. His problem has been he's been in foul trouble constantly. He constantly gets the touch fouls. It almost seems like the refs are they go into the game thinking that, knowing the scouting report, that he tends to commit a lot of fouls, and it's like they confirm that based on the calls that they're making. They just see, because it's all these touchy fouls that he seems to pick up. So he's been in a lot of foul trouble, and I think that's kind of affected his minutes. So more so than anybody else kind of taking minutes away from him. So Wendell Carter Jr., he needs to stay out of foul trouble. He's a good player. He's kind of like I said with Chris Dunn, he's the kind of guy that can fill up the box score a little bit. He can score, he can rebound. He's a good passer. He hasn't really, had the opportunity to show it a ton with the Bulls just because he doesn't have the ball in his hands a ton because they have so many other ball dominant guys on their team. But he can also block shots. He's a really good shot blocker. So if that's part of your a category that you can score points in fantasy, that's definitely something Carter Jr. can provide you. But I'm not really concerned about his minutes. Like I said, it's just he's been in so much foul trouble that's the reason why he hasn't played as much as you might like.
Gotcha. Paul, thank you so much again. We went through every position on the floor. I didn't hurt you too much, right?
No, that was good. I enjoy it. I hope I sounded competent.
You sounded competent. You sounded outstanding. He is Paul Steeno, PB Steeno on Twitter. Give him a follow. He is a contributor over at blogabull.com. They're at Bulls Blogger on Twitter. We'll make sure to tag all this good stuff when this podcast comes out. Paul, thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Big thank you to Paul Steeno of blogabull.com. PB Steeno on Twitter. We'll make sure to get him tagged in all the stuff that goes out about this podcast as well. Monday evening. We covered the whole weekend. Let's cover tonight. Let's do a little look ahead. It's a nice Monday. You got yourself an 8-game card. Milwaukee is in Detroit. Dude. I don't pause to say dude very often on the podcast, but this is a very weird Monday night card because you have a lot of teams playing each other for the second or even third time in a relatively short span. And you know me, I hate to do large volume betting, but there's a bunch of games on the card tonight that would fall into that revenge department. The question is, how do we whittle down to the ones that matter the most? Milwaukee in Detroit. Pistons are on revenge in this ballgame, catching 4 points at home. I actually kind of like the Detroit side a little bit. They played really well in their last game. That was a revenge game against Boston. I think they got payback on the brain, and this is a Central Division showdown. I think this is going to be a good one. Phoenix is in New York. From a fantasy standpoint, by the way, all we're really watching in that game is to see if Chris Middleton looks okay. Phoenix in New York. It doesn't sound like Oubre and Rivers will join the Suns for this ballgame, so you got at least one more game here of bonus Mikal Bridges and DeAnthony Melton. But really, using them right now is a bit of a crapshoot because you've got Booker and Warren and Ayton chewing up all the shots on offense. You've got Rashawn Holmes collecting the ultra hustle stats. And so what's left? Not a lot. I think I'm shying away from using those fringy Phoenix guys, even though the new guys aren't in town just yet. For the Knicks, we've already talked about them. It's basically the same stuff I said in our weekend review, which was effectively you got the three core guys that aren't moving in or out from fantasy value, Cantor, Hardaway, and Vonleh. And then you've got Knox and Moutier, who are basically in the points league department right now. Knox, they're both kind of knocking on the door of 9-cap, but those percentages are going to break you. Sacramento, Minnesota. This is double revenge for Minnesota. They just got whipped in Sacramento. Kings made a franchise record 19 3-pointers in that game. But Minnesota also coming home off a loss in Phoenix. They're just not playing well right now. Two things button heads. Minnesota playing poorly, Sacramento playing well. How do you take a team playing poorly, laying 7.5 points? That's an impossible bet to make. If you're going to play the double revenge on Minnesota, I think you got to go real small. Oklahoma City hosting Chicago, laying 13. Another similar situation. Oklahoma City often plays down to the level of their competition. Chicago coming off a road win in San Antonio. And a revenge spot for the Thunder? Yeah, they lost in Chicago last week. Brutal loss. A stupid loss, honestly. But how do you lay 13 points against a Bulls team that's playing better, getting Chris Dunn back, and Portis, and Markkanen, and Oklahoma City, who they have this great defensive efficiency, but their offense is just not very good. That's another one where if you're going to play the revenge side, I think you got to go small. Houston by 4.5 at home against the Utah Jazz. This is one that's a little bit more intriguing to me. I know that it does kind of feel like a weird line. Houston only laying 4.5 points in their own arena. But I think there's still this feeling like Houston has been struggling hard this year, and I don't think people have fully grasped that they're playing better lately. So I really like the Rockets in this game. Jazz have been stinking it up. They're slumping. I don't know how it's a similar thing. Like, how do you lay money on a team that's slumping? Houston is warming up. I like that side much better. From a fantasy standpoint, we've been forgetting to talk about the fantasy stuff. For Minnesota, the question obviously is Taj Gibson back? And if so, how do the minutes break out at power forward? Chicago, we're watching the big men mostly because I think we know what's going to happen at the guard and small forward spots, at least once they're healthy. Utah, Houston, no real questions there. Philly, San Antonio, not a ton in the fantasy question department. This is a pick'em, and there's no real motivational angle here. Portland is in Los Angeles. These two teams have actually split their first two meetings so far this year, so there's no revenge. Question is, do you think the Clippers have their energy back in this one, or do they get it back in the next one? Slight lean to the Portland Trailblazers just while the Clippers are playing so poorly. And then Memphis is on revenge in Golden State. Warriors are laying 11 in their home arena. This is one of those ones where I lean to Memphis because that's a Grizzlies team that, if you look at it outside of their game against the Lakers, that's the one anomaly. They've played a ton of games decided by single-digit points against good and bad competition. They lost by 8 to Houston. They lost by 3 to Miami. They won by 9 against Portland, lost by 6 to Denver, got blown out by the Lakers. 4-point game with New Orleans, 10-point game with the Clippers. There's your biggest discrepancy. 8-point game with Philly, 6-point game with Brooklyn, 8-point game with Toronto, 5-point game with New York. The Grizzlies slow it down, and so points become harder to come by. And when that's the case, and the line reflects it, by the way, the total on this game is only 210.5. Right? Doesn't that seem obscenely low for a Warriors game? This is the Warriors we're talking about here. Well, that's because the Grizzlies walk it up. They want to just grind you into a pulp. Warriors, historically, by the way, have actually kind of struggled with teams that just want to knock them in the mouth a few times. Warriors want to get out, open it up, free and easy. So I like the Grizzlies in this one. I have too many games that I like. I hate when I have that sensation. I like Detroit. I like Houston. I like Memphis. There's two other revenge angles that I don't like as much in Minnesota and Oklahoma City, but we're talking about a card of 8 games where 5 sides have something pulling me towards them, and we'll sort it all out on Twitter. And that is our teaser here to get you to the end of the podcast. If you want to know what I actually make a bet on, you got to go to Twitter. That's where we'll make the final call on these bad boys. This is Fantasy NBA Today. Another big thank you to Paul Steeno for hopping on and giving us a little look behind the curtain in Chicago. What's going to happen as we move forward with that team. In terms of guests, the rest of this week, the list is significant. Anthony Irwin of the Locked On Lakers podcast will join us on tomorrow's episode of Fantasy NBA, which is Fantasy NBA Today, which is pretty damn cool. We'll have Mike Apatria on Wednesday to help us get ready for our DFS contest. Remember to check out Twitter for that link, and let me know if you want to get on our DFS contest mailing list. We'll have Christian Villery on the pod later this week. We'll have another Blog a Bull representative. That'll be Jacob Bickshorn probably first thing next week. The guests, they come fast and furious, and of course live with Brewski on Friday. That's the plan, Stan, here on Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris at Dan Besbris on Twitter. Have a lovely Monday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.